Jeff Carlson takes control of the Apple Watch. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by NordVPN. Get secure and private access to the internet with a special deal at nordvpn.com/MacVoices. This week's MacVoices is supported by Kolide. Kolide is an endpoint solution that uses the most powerful untapped resource in IT, end users. Learn more at kolide.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it seems like there's a lot of press going on right now, and probably will be through the holidays, about the Apple Watch. That means it's a perfect time to talk to Jeff Carlson about his third edition of Take Control of Apple Watch. Jeff, welcome. It's great to have you.
Thank you. It's always great to be on.
I always enjoy our conversations, but right now, at least as we record this, there's so much press going on about the Apple Watch Ultra. What percentage of teens have Apple Watches on their wrist, the amount of iPhone, Apple Watch connectivity overall, adults and kids. The Apple Watch has really kind of captured, I think, everybody's imagination for a device that was almost, I don't want to say a throwaway, but it really, when it came out, it was not quite that big a deal, and it's become a really big deal.
Well, it's weird. It follows in that sort of modern Apple trend of something that starts out sort of modestly. I mean, if you remember the iPhone was absolutely a big deal because Apple was getting into this market. But Apple themselves, they were very modest. They're like, well, we're really hoping we can get 10% of this vast market. And like within the first year or something like that. And, for a while, maybe you'd see one here and there and kind of that would be it. And then suddenly you saw a lot of people with iPhones and, everything just kind of went crazy. I know the iPhone's not a great example just because it's been such a huge success. But the Apple Watch kind of started the same thing. A whole lot of press, a whole lot of publicity, a big marketing push by Apple because, this was when Johnny Ive was very deeply involved with the design, and they had gold ones and they had stainless steel ones and aluminum ones, and trying to put this into position, not just here's a little accessory for your wrist, but this was a fashion statement. And, that it didn't really go very far, especially, I guess, for the people who spent $18,000 on a watch that no longer runs. But at the same time, for the people who bought that, they probably don't really care. Like, it's probably not too much money for them. And in the 9 generations since, it's just been this like slow build to the point now where I see people wearing Apple Watches all the time. It's no longer this nerd geek thing. It's just this very helpful thing that a lot of people have. Now, whether people are using it to their fullest extent, that's kind of where my book comes in, because I have no data to back this up, but it would not surprise me at all if most people use, just a tiny fraction of what the Apple Watch can do, because it's telling them time, it's helping them with fitness. That's also another surprise, is that the Apple Watch has become much more of a fitness device. Apple discovered that, its real niche was to be this fitness companion and track your steps and your workouts, and Apple TV, Apple Fitness Plus, and all of that. But I think a lot of people just they like having it. They like having something that is tied into their phones that they already have. They like something that, will give them notifications and let them, hang up incoming spam calls without having to dig out their phone. And just like it's a broad enough use case that it's appealing to a lot more people. And like I said, now I see them everywhere. And so it's really interesting when Apple comes out with something new to see, all right, how can we expand on this with, say, the Apple Watch Ultra or some of the other, safety features, things like that. And yeah, it's been this sort of quiet success that now I think it's just more accepted that, oh yeah, it's the Apple Watch.
Well, not only that, Jeff, I mean, you jogged my memory on a couple things there. The first is a recent memory where I went to a meeting and I was looking kind of sideways at the people who weren't wearing Apple Watches. And, now there are always the people that just aren't going to wear a watch, and that's fine. That's
yeah, sure.
Nobody's ever going to get that market. But, and these were not people that had the massive Rolexes or anything. They had just made another choice. And it's like, I almost wanted to say why, but, then you really sound like a real Apple geek and, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But I also remember back in the very early days after I got my Apple Watch, having a conversation with Ken Ray. And he was the interviewer in that particular conversation. And he said, if you forgot your Apple Watch, would you turn around and go home for it? And it's like, absolutely. And now, I mean, it's even worse, because now if I forget my Apple Watch, well, I seldom do, because it's just, I'm always accessing it for one reason or the other. So it's harder to forget your Apple Watch.
Yeah, true. I mean, for me, I am one of those people who I wear the watch at night, all night, because I think that was sort of the use case of, well, people are going to take their watch off at the end of the day, charge it overnight, and then they, would forget to put it on. And like that became I think that's how a lot of people in that situation, forget to put on their watch, and then maybe they just keep forgetting, and then they don't use it, and et cetera. I'm one of those people. I wear it all night, every night, partially because I want to have the sleep tracking, which has been improved in the newest version, but I'm not real dedicated religious to check it all the time. I like having it, which is a different thing, right? Like it's a consistency thing. It's like I have an app called, I forgot what it's called, Streaks. I have an app called Streaks, and it reminds me to, take my vitamins in the morning. And what's great about that is that when you do it, one night, 2 nights, 3 nights, 5, it builds up that consistent habit. So then you're just not really thinking about, oh, geez, did I take my vitamins? Am I wearing my watch? So it's always just sort of there. And what was my point in bringing all that up? It's just there's so many things that the watch can do now that just reinforce everyday daily things. So, sorry, I remember. The reason that I wear it all night actually is because I like having a morning alarm that isn't a big blasting klaxon in my bedroom, right? I mean, I've gone through those days when, I had to put the alarm on the other side of the room, make it really loud. And, my wife is not always appreciative of that, even though we generally tend to get up around the same time. You don't really want to be jolted awake. At least we don't. And so I have on my watch, I put it into sleep mode every night. It automatically kicks into that. And then when my alarm goes off, it just taps my wrist. And because that's something different, because it's a physical sensation, and because it's something that I've just come to do now for years now, it will wake me up, and I can get woken up and not disturb my wife, and everybody's happy, right? And so it's things like this that, if you don't have a watch and you don't wear a watch normally, and you're looking at an Apple Watch and you think, well, I could get a Fitbit, or I could just get a regular old watch if I need to tell my time, or I don't even need that because I have a phone that tells the time all the time, right? It's a little harder to express that, no, the things that make an Apple Watch interesting and valuable are the everyday little things like getting a notification when something important comes in, like your email to me earlier saying, "Hey, let's do this podcast." Like that popped up on my watch because I have you marked as a VIP, and there are a number of things like that, and then Apple just kind of keeps adding a bunch of other little things that don't always seem like a big deal, but end up cumulatively making it a better experience.
This is a poor analogy, but I'll use it anyway. I know people that buy cars. They'll go to test drive a car, and because it's not comfortable to sit in, or they don't like the way the controls are placed, forget gas mileage. Forget even sometimes price to some degree. It's those little creature comforts and the things that you use or are going to interact with every single day. And so I think your point about the little things is a spectacular one, because look, it's got the health tracking, and hopefully neither one of us will ever have any heart issues that we have to be alerted to. But it's kind of nice to have there. But that's not something that I'm not going to be concerned about. Beyond about 10 minutes after I set it up, and then it's like, okay, all right, it hasn't triggered yet, so I guess I'm okay. So I can go about my life.
Yeah.
But it's like it's the messages, the notifications, the subtle. A message comes in, and if I'm with someone, I can take a quick glance down and say, "Oh, I really need to address this," or "No, I don't." It's, as you said, the phone call that comes in, and right on your wrist it says spam risk. Okay, I can definitely going to ignore that. All those little things that you deal with every single day that make it just such an amazingly useful device.
Yeah. Yeah. It's when you buy a new pair of shoes, and they can be the best looking shoes in the world, and they can be, like if you're a shoe collector and they're like super popular or whatever. And if you put your feet into them and they're not comfortable, you're not going to wear them. And so, that's just kind of a waste. And we've talked about that, with cameras too. It's so important when you're buying a camera to get your hands on it, because if it's not comfortable in your hand, you're just not going to use it. And the brilliance of the Apple Watch is, for the most part, it's unobtrusive. Even to the point where, there's like a larger version and there's a smaller version for people who have smaller wrists. And for some people, like, they just want something that is giving them that information. But it's not a phone. It's not the thing that you grab out of your pocket and then takes all of your attention, right? And it's not something that when you go to check something on your phone, you're like, oh, I got a message. And then you're like, oh, well, since I'm here, I should probably check Facebook. And, oh boy, I never finished that poker game that I started earlier, like all of that kind of stuff.
Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by Kolide. Kolide is a fleet visibility solution for Mac, Windows, and Linux that can help you securely scale your business. The challenge with endpoint security has always been that it's difficult to scale, and when remote work took over, that challenge got exponentially harder. You need visibility into your fleet of devices in order to meet security goals and reduce service desk tickets. But how do you get that visibility when different parts of your company run on Mac, Windows, and Linux? You get Kolide. Kolide is an endpoint security solution that gives IT teams a single dashboard for all devices, regardless of their operating system. Kolide gives you real-time access to your fleet's data and can do things that traditional MDMs can't. And instead of installing intrusive agents or locking down devices, Kolide takes a user-focused approach that communicates security recommendations to your employees directly on Slack. You can answer every question you have about your fleet without intruding on your workforce. Visit kolide.com/MacVoices to find out how. If you follow that link, they'll hook you up with a goodie bag just for activating a free trial. That's Kolide, KOLIDE.com/MacVoices. Again, Kolide.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Kolide for their support of MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by NordVPN. Get secure and private access to the internet with NordVPN. Do you feel like someone's always looking over your shoulder? That they are tracking you around the internet and then throwing ads at you for what you've already looked at? Watching what you watch on the streaming services? You need NordVPN. NordVPN keeps your information encrypted so you never have to worry about your IP or location getting out. Where you surf and what you look at is yours and yours alone. Or maybe you're concerned with who might be checking out your web traffic when you visit your local coffee shop or restaurant. Again, NordVPN helps you keep both safe and secure from prying cyber eyes. Using my link, nordvpn.com/MacVoices, can get you a great deal on a 2-year plan plus 4 months free. That's 28 months of privacy and security for all your surfing and video binging, no matter where you are. And with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee, there's nothing to lose. If you like it, great. You can sleep a little more soundly. If not, they'll issue a refund and you can pretend like it never happened. But somehow I doubt that. Check it out at nordvpn.com/MacVoices to get your subscription started today. That's nordvpn.com/MacVoices. Thanks to NordVPN for supporting this week's MacVoices. So this is the third edition. And
Yes.
I guess after everything we've just said, there's no shortage of things in each edition that are new. Obviously you refine things as you go along, but there's always something new to talk about. And it seems like right now the big thing to talk about is the Apple Watch Ultra.
Literally the big thing to talk about is the Apple Watch Ultra.
Yeah. Good point. How much time do you spend on the Ultra in the book versus the normal Apple Watch?
Everything else. So in full disclosure, I didn't have an Apple Watch Ultra to test with. Just personally, it's not something that I need to purchase. I'm not a extreme sports athlete. I know it's hard to tell, but basically, it has a lot of different features that are accessible with the online documentation and all of that. So a little like quick glimpse into the grit and dirty world of making books. Sometimes you don't actually have the thing with you. But for example, the Apple Watch has the action button, and the action button can do a number of different things. You can program. It's like a completely separate physical button, and you can set it to maybe start your favorite workout, or when you're in the middle of a workout, it can do different sort of splits and timings. And another example that I didn't test hands-on was the diving capabilities. There's an app that will just let you record how far you are diving, and it's super cool. And then so I've written about as much as I can, but everything else is consistent with what you'll get with any Apple Watch right now. And so, like for example, another thing that's brand new, that's enhanced with the Ultra, but everybody who has a modern watch that can run it, which I think is the Series 5 and above, the Compass app has been completely rewritten, and its super cool aspect is that you can set waypoints. So let's say you're out on a hike and you just set a waypoint for where you started your hike. And then maybe you're, kind of midway through, or you come to a fork in the trail, set another waypoint, and just continue on. Now, it is probably not the case for a lot of people, but it's completely realistic that I can get lost in the woods because we have lots of trees, and I've never had a good sense of north, south, east, and west. All these things I probably shouldn't be admitting out loud, but what you can do is set this feature called Backtrack. And what the Compass will do is basically plot you a course back to your waypoints. And as long as you are following the direction on the compass, it'll get you back to where you were. Now that sounds like it's a kind of cool, neat feature, but what's even better is if you are, say, out of range. Actually, this happened to me this weekend. I was out hiking in the North Cascades, and beyond cell coverage, and I had set the fitness app to do. I'd set the workout app to do like an outdoor hike, so it was tracking my steps and all of that. But I didn't think to do anything with the compass, because I was on a hike, I was looking for photos to shoot, and there was one point where there were like several splits to get back on the main path to go back toward the car, and I wasn't exactly sure which one to take, and at that point there weren't a lot of people there, but I never set any waypoints. Well, I was like, all right, I'll give this a try, because when I opened the compass app and you tap the little backtrack button, it knew it had been keeping track of all of my steps, A, because I was offline, and B, because I was running that workout app. And so, the watch had basically just been keeping a bunch of GPS coordinates for me. And that allowed me to know which path I needed to take, which then took me to the next bend. And, it worked really well. And this was just, on my Apple Watch Series 8, not the Ultra, anything, super fancy. And so anybody with a Series 5 or later can take advantage of something like that.
That's not a feature I personally was aware of. And so I want to make sure we repeat that's not an Apple Watch Ultra feature. That's Watch 5 and above. But also, I want to make sure, because you said it, and I want to make sure I've got it right. You had to be tracking your walk or your hike. You had to have started that in order to have that feature active, right?
No. So the way that it's supposed to work, and so I guess my testing is a little skewed because I happen to be using that workout. But the way that it's supposed to work is, as soon as you are basically off the grid. So your watch and your phone, they don't have a cellular connection. It can't connect to the internet. So it makes the assumption, you are, out in the wilderness. And the watch, because all the watches have a GPS chip, they can record their locations. It's just kind of one of the features of the workout things. But also with this, it can basically just sort of use that data that it's been collecting in the background, because it saw that I was out of bounds. I was away from any sort of civilization, or because there was no cellular signal or Wi-Fi, I must have been way far away from civilization, because like, who even goes out there? And so the Backtrack then can take advantage of that. Now, I've seen some reviews and some like YouTube videos where that hasn't really consistently kicked in. So maybe that's just a bug that's being worked out. But it's a fallback, which is kind of the point with some of the updates here, some of the safety updates, is you have a way to at least get you started, get you moving in the right direction.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I'm glad that you specified the fact that it kicks in if you go off the grid, because otherwise then we're going to get the people that write to us and say, oh my God, my Apple Watch is now tracking me, and you're telling me it's tracking me. And it's like, no, it's not. It's tracking you when there's a good possibility that you really need it to. And I'm sure if you're really paranoid and you want to go out and get lost in the woods, there's probably a way to turn it off. But why would you want to do that?
Yeah, I think so.
So
I think so, yeah. Well, and the app, when you turn on the Backtrack feature, it specifically needs your permission to access your recent GPS locations, and you have to do that every time. So it's not like Apple's just like, well, maybe you're going to want to use this, so we're just going to track your location all the time. Like that's not what's going on here. It's like a whole lot of these location privacy things. Like you have to specify that it can access that data. And to the best of my knowledge, none of that data goes to Apple because it's all just there on your watch and there on your phone.
Yeah. I mean, and it's one of those reasons that you probably should get used to turning on the walking or the tracking or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know I personally have a bad habit of, if I leave the house and there's a park probably about half a mile from me that go down and walk around the park, that I'll get partway down there. It's like, oh, we see that you're doing an outdoor walk, and it's like, yeah, okay, I'll turn it on, and then you forget to turn it off. But the point is, you forget to turn it on, and it's probably a good thing. Now, I'm in a pretty relatively urban area, at least compared to what you're talking about. So I'm never going to leave connectivity. So it's not quite definitely is not as big a deal. But for someone that's doing some of what you're doing, connectivity or not, it's a nice feature to have.
Yeah, definitely. And you can set different bearings and stuff that you were able to do before. It's just having the waypoints and having the backtrack, and they redesigned the app so it looks a little bit nicer. It's just it's a nice handy thing. It's like you take a compass with you if you go camping. I can't tell you the last time I actually used a real compass, but I always have it just in case. I have to scavenge what I know, what I learned in Boy Scouts about how to use an actual compass. And here I have something now on my wrist that will not only, show me which way is north and see which heading I'm in and see if I'm way off of my bearing, but it will basically let me retrace my steps if I need to. So it's very clever. And again, it's just this thing on your wrist that's doing all this, which is also amazing and helpful. And if you're not doing anything like that, it's there for you, but it doesn't get in the way, right?
Yeah.
So that's also cool.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Well, just like me, I forget I'm wearing the darn thing, and it says, "Oh yeah, by the way, we think you're doing this." Oh yeah, you're right, I am. Good for you and good for me. So yeah, it is unobtrusive. It will intrude at the right times, and again, you can turn a lot of that stuff off if it bothers you. But I kind of like to have as much on as I can because it reminds me of all the things that my watch can do that maybe I forget about, or I may forget about it in the moment. And it would be useful to have.
Yeah. And in general, I'm finding that a lot of those things are just a little bit better. Like, for example, it seems like if I do start on a walk and I forget to start, begin the outdoor walk workout that I usually do, it seems more consistent that it will notice that I've been walking, that I've been moving, that I'm my heart rate is a little bit up, and ask me, oh, it looks like you're on a walk. Do you want to record this? And I say yes. And what's also nice about that is it starts that activity at the point when, like not just right then, if you've been walking for 10 or 15 minutes, it sort of backfills it from when you left your last location, or I'm not exactly sure how they determine that algorithm, but I'll be in the middle of a walk and it'll say, do you want to start a walk? And I say yes. And already 12 minutes have gone by and it's been recording that data anyway, so I get the advantage of getting the full walk and not just maybe the last 2/3 of it. So like that is improved. I'm trying to think of some of the other like fitness things, because so many people have turned to this for fitness. Like if you're a runner, there's more information about like tracking heart rate zones, which is pretty cool. So you can say, I need to make sure that my second mile, my heart rate is in the 130 to 150 range, and there's a way to see that. There's also just different ways to configure what you see during a workout. Because, for example, for a walk or a run, you'll see, the time elapsed and the distance and a few of those things. But there are other metrics that maybe you want to like see your elevation climb, for example. And in my book, there's a whole section about how to do that because they completely changed it from the last version, from watchOS 9. And so if you wanted to, change the look of it so that you didn't have to look at something that you didn't care about and you wanted to add something that you did, there's a way to do that. But it's not intuitive at all. And so, it's one of those sort of things where Apple has changed something in a big way. And I mean, I had to go into the online manuals to figure out how they did this because I knew that you could do it, but what I had in my previous books just no longer worked. And the short version is you do it on the watch rather than in the watch app on the iPhone. And that gives you an interface that's sort of like when you're setting up new watch faces, and you can add little components here and there. I can't imagine there's any way someone would just stumble upon that. They would just think, oh, well, I guess I just have to, look at my dumb elevation that I don't really care about. What I really want to know is how, my heart rate zones are working, things like that. Trying to think
Jeff,
of what else. Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm reminded of a couple conversations I've had about the iPhone, and some people complaining that if it takes you have to go 5 or 6 levels deep in settings to get to something. And I feel like the watch is a lot younger, and so it clearly is still evolving, and Apple's adding new features to it all the time. But at the end of the day, we're right back to that same old thing that the more features you add and the more control you offer the user, the more control you offer the user, and therefore there are more settings and finer grained settings. And I think Apple does my opinion is Apple does a really good job of trying to put the most used things most of the time at the upper levels. And if you really are one of those people that wants to dig down, you can get down to them. And what you just said about switching, the control from the watch app over to the phone, to the watch itself. I mean, part of that seems like that would be a logical step, but if you have to dig down 5 layers on the watch, it's a lot more difficult than digging down 5 layers on the watch app. So, where's the trade-off?
I think we're sort of like straddling a bunch of different trade-offs. This is actually an area where I think Apple needs to be a little more consistent, because the basic truth is there's not a whole lot of real estate to work with on the watch, and there are different ways of accessing these things. But it's also that Apple thing where some things are just not as discoverable, and so there are things that you can configure on the watch, but you configure it differently on the iPhone. There are a few things, and of course, I can't think of a good example right at the moment. Like I think some of the health-related things, you can do more in the health app on the phone rather than just in the fitness app or some of those different options. Like, for example, there's not a health app on the watch. I'm thinking of like cycle tracking. So for women who want to track their cycles, Apple added new sensors on the Series 8 and the Ultra. And they have temperature sensors that basically check your body temperature at night. Now, it seems like a temperature sensor would be cool to have all the time, and I have a feeling that Apple will probably do something in that regard and make it broader. But here they just stuck to one use case, and it uses that temperature data plus whatever other algorithms that they have put together, and how much you're tracking, when your period started, and if if there are any other symptoms or any other circumstances, then it can give you a rough idea of when the ovulation period is going to happen. Okay, so all of that, there's a lot more of that in the health app on the phone, and on the watch itself, there's a cycle tracking app, and that basically just gives you the options to say, my period started today, and my period ended here, and you can like make some rudimentary notes, or maybe track a symptom or fever or something like that. And so it's not like a mirrored situation where whatever you can do on your phone you can do on your watch. Some things are kind of split, and so that's where it helps to have something like my book, where I've run into that block and say, all right, there has to be a way to control this thing, and I'm not seeing it here, so now I need to dig into it, and all right, it's in the Apple Watch app, not the Apple Health app on the iPhone, versus a setting on the watch itself. So, because the watch can do a lot of stuff, there's also a level of complication that Apple, I think, mostly hides. But for the people who really want to get into that, it's not like you can just sit down and say, oh, well, I'm just going to figure out everything on my watch, because, we're still looking at a, tiny little interface.
Jeff is back in the next edition of Mac Voices to wrap up our conversation about the Apple Watch, the Series 8 Apple Watch, the Apple Watch Ultra, and a whole lot more. That's next time on Mac Voices. I hope to see you then. Until then, and as always, I'm Chuck Joyner. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.